And a huge thank you to our panelists and our team, Harriet, Serena, Lauren, and Kate, for joining today. We've got some really good insights and want to really get into the conversation about skills-based approach, why skills are the right thing to do for the future, and how and hear from firms how it's already helping their journey, especially as we're seeing such levels of disruption from tech, from new products and tools in the market. Having to have the right people in your business to weather this storm, to take advantage of the opportunities, is absolutely essential. And skills are becoming more and more the currency of the future. So, just to introduce the Financial Services Skills Commission, if you're not familiar with us, we are a membership body in financial services working with firms to grow and develop the skills that they need for the future, try and close their skills gaps. And we're very collaborative. We learn from each other. We always say that we don't have all the answers, but somewhere in membership we do. So we find that best practice, and so everyone can learn and everyone can go on their journey a little bit quicker with a few less bumps in the road by that best practice sharing. We've got over 50 members that we work with across all of the UK, so it really is a great collaboration. Pleased to say that we've got three of our members with us today. So Harriet Newland from PwC, Kate Ramsden from Barclays, and Lauren Nolloth from Ageas. And we're going to be able to hear from them later. We're going to have a bit of a presentation. Harriet's going to talk us through why skills is important at the moment. And then Serena's going to take us through some of the work we've done about a skills-based approach, how firms are actually approaching and implementing a skills-based approach in their organisation. So we'll hear from Serena on that. And then we're going to hear from Lauren and Kate on how they're implementing this in their organisation and really get some of that nitty gritty, what it looks like, what choices they made, what they did and didn't do, what they might do differently if they could do it again. So some of that shared learning. And then in the tradition of all great webinars, we've got the opportunity for audience questions. So using the Q&A function, please do put your questions in and we'll put them to our great participants towards the latter part of the session. So I'm going to hand over to Harriet now to tell us of why skills, why now, why is this important in financial services, and why should firms pay attention to this? So Harriet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. My name's Harriet. For those of you I don't know, I'm a partner in our workforce transformation practice here at PwC. So as Claire said, I'll just do a bit on the why now and what are we seeing before handing over to Serena to talk through more of the practical advice coming out of the FSSC, and of course onto Lauren and Kate for some more detail around what they're doing in the world of skills right now. So I thought I'd start because we have a very timely release of our 29th annual CEO survey, which up until 6 p.m. last night when it was released in Davos was under lock and key. So let me start there just with a few stats and bear with me because it is brand new. The CEO survey, just so you know, we do it every year. We're 29 years in, nearly 30 years, and it has over 4,400 CEOs contribute to this. So it gives you a real feel across 95 markets, different industries, and I won't bore you with all the stats. You can go online and filter by industry, sector and market. But I think some of the key trends are around leading through uncertainty in the age of AI. Interestingly, only 30% of CEOs are confident in near-term growth, which shows the challenges and the concerns they're really facing into. That increases to 50% over 3 years, but in the short term, you can feel the uncertainty. And also only 27% of CEOs believe their teams have the right skills to anticipate the disruption coming. In terms of what's hot on their minds, it won't be a surprise that this year, as per last year, skills availability remains a top 6 CEO threat. Now, there are some changes in the top kind of list. As you can imagine, geopolitical instability, economic volatility, and of course tariffs this year makes the top list. And it's really interesting to see how different CEOs in different organizations and different markets are seeing that really impact their business strategy and how they're having to adapt because of it. But of course cyber has risen to the top, and of course the pace of technological disruption, and those two, as well as all of them, are intrinsically linked to facing off into the skill shortages and supply that we see in the market. So it's a cautious view from CEOs looking at the world ahead and thinking about how to really navigate it with skills continuing to be a priority for them. I just want to talk about AI briefly because it's very clear to me that AI and the pace of this acceleration of this technology is propelling the SBO strategy and the need to take a skills first approach even more so than ever we've seen. Yes, we saw last year lots of AI tools become available to the workforce, but I think it's fair to say, and the survey does reinforce this, we didn't see the huge amount of productivity or large amount of efficiency gains that we thought we would. But we did see, particularly in FS, some really interesting pilots, particularly as we saw agentic in 2025 come to the forefront. So across customer services, across claims, across underwriting, we are seeing true agentic pilots, which we expect to scale throughout 2026 and 2027. And this is going to accelerate the disruption to people's jobs, not just entry-level jobs, but bits of people's jobs and the skills we need to lead through this change. And that's interesting because the CEO survey says only 42% of CEOs can attract the high quality of AI talent and skills that they need. So I think, and of course broader, if we're really going to have the computing power and data centers and water cooling experts that we need, those skills do not exist in the supply and demand to help us reshape the future, which is the opportunity which we now have with this brilliant advancements in technological change. However, so while it's accelerating the SBO strategy and the requirement to put skills at the centre of your workforce strategy, I also think it's not just the technological components, it's, as Claire mentioned, it's the human skills. How are we going to have leaders who lead through uncertainty, who are resilient, who can create the future? And that's putting more focus on human skills. However, the good news is we've come off the back of a couple of years of lots of organisations experimenting in this space. We saw a big movement in the workforce and HR technologies to be able to help enable you move faster in this space, particularly with a shift from the HR and workforce technologies going from jobs to tasks to skills, which means you can really start to think about how to get ahead, how to disrupt different roles, what skills you need today, what skills you might need tomorrow, and how would you shape your workforce if you were being skills based. And I think that's really, really important because it is a shift, and importantly, this actually makes some of the technology more attainable, more affordable. Combine that with the lessons we're seeing, which I know Serena will talk about in the implementation guide in a minute, about how you can get ahead faster. It's not just about technology and data, although that is a platform. It's about culture, it's about leadership skills. But because of that, the strategy to become skills based and skills first, the initiatives you can accelerate today faster than you've ever been able to. So I'll just share, before I hand over, 3 things I'm seeing in the market that organisations are really, really focused on. The first is the continuation of skills-based strategic workforce planning. And we really saw this ramp up over the course of last year. While the fundamental methodology of strategic workforce planning, which is hard and it's difficult to do, hasn't changed, the way you can approach this with real-time skills, real-time labour market trends to help accelerate and leapfrog your process is significantly at a much more advanced stage than it was 2 years ago. And I think that's really important. We saw a lot of organisations embedding it into their BAU annual budgeting cycles last year. And already this year, we've seen a lot of demand from our clients and customers trying to really put pressure on this to help reshape their workforce in the future and take advantage in what is a challenging market. Second one, talent mobility. It's not going anywhere. I think we've seen with the disruption to the entry-level jobs, the importance of ensuring that you give people really effective cycles of experience quite quickly. You think about what skills they're going to be developing. We've got organisations who are now on their 3rd generation talent marketplaces, and that's great because what they've learned from the first, which was quite expensive and very first movers, you can now take some of those learning lessons and actually move that, with talent mobility being critical to boosting workforce productivity, efficiency, absolutely increasing engagement, retention, reducing retention and increasing workforce diversity. So talent mobility, a big topic for this year, continues. And the final one is skills-based reward. Now, this is such a hot topic and no one's quite nailed this, but in the concept of we pay people traditionally reward, which looks back of, a bonus, annual bonus looks back at the skills someone deployed 12 months ago. Well, how do we start to think about what are the critical skills we need in the future, and how do we use monetary and non-monetary incentives to help people develop the skills they need and apply them against the future business strategy? So, just some highlights of what we're seeing. I would summarize, however, no one has got all the answers. No one has joined up the supply and demand to all of those end-to-end initiatives, but there's a huge amount of learning lessons. Serena will now, as our PwC kind of skills first leader who's been on secondment to the FSSC, will now talk you through some of the highlights of the SBO implementation guide. What I would say is working with organisations like the Financial Services Skills Commission, and if you're on this meeting, you'll get some insights, but being a true partner with them and a member, you'll get not just huge amounts of insights, sharings, learnings, you get a network. And that is, we're all on this journey together, and that is the value of being partner of this organisation. So, Serena, I will stop talking and hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Harriet. And just on that, so many firms will tell us, and just on that network point, the drafting of this piece of work, which is the SBO implementation guide, it really came from a lot of our members coming together, sharing their experiences on how they get started on their journey, whether they were a larger institution or a smaller firm without big budgets. This is where they actually just thought, this is what we need to get started. So as we spoke to a lot of firms, a clear pattern emerged. There isn't one route into becoming skills-based. It is not a linear journey. And the reality is there are two complementary pathways, one structural and one targeted. And the reality is most firms will actually do a combination of both over time. So they'll start with something targeted and they'll move more to structural elements as they scale. So as we look to the targeted path, this is starting with a business problem, and it's often the most practical starting point, especially for smaller firms. So from our conversations with our members, but also looking at key industry insights and case studies across the FS sector, a few principles really stood out here. Firstly, anchoring into a real business need. So start with a problem that your business already cares about. Now, in the FS sector, this might be underwriting capacity, it might be consumer duty capability, and that's an area that you really want to hone into and anchor there. You also next want to then make skills really visible. So use a straightforward tool. It can even be a spreadsheet or a project board where you list out skills and you link them to real opportunities. And really important here is you want to make data the conversation starter here. Skills data will help you talk to your leaders about gaps, supply, demand, future needs in the FS sector. And as Harriet mentioned, there's a lot of disruption and areas in which the FS sector is going. How do you get ahead of that conversation? How do you make your organization secure for those future needs? So making a conversation more skills-led through data, you take away the opinion and you move it to evidence. Rather than, I think we're short of X number of people, you move to, we need 30 more people here in cybersecurity, for example. You also want to think about targeting the right use cases. So parts of your business might already be going through change. We've mentioned tech. There's also underwriting or digital operations, particularly in FS, which is a hot area. Where is upskilling the most urgent in your organization? So to summarize the targeted path, it's starting with a real business challenge, delivering those quick wins, and building momentum through evidence. Once you see that work, you can't stay in pilot mode. You would want to scale and you want to hard code skills into how the business runs and operates. That is the structural path, which is the top path. This is where you want to build your business case and recognize skills as a strategic lever and not just a siloed HR initiative. So as we've seen from our members, this is done well where skills are really at the heart of the strategy, and it's not just in one area of the business that's running with it. And you might want to think about developing a common skills language, which could be aligned to your job architecture. So the same skills mean the same thing across your locations and across your business units. You might also want to consider creating a skills taxonomy, and we've got a number of materials in the FSSC that help you to create that skills taxonomy, which is essentially a structured list of all the skills that matter in your firm. Then you want to think about integrating these skills into your HR processes. What does this mean from a hiring perspective, performance perspective? As we heard from Harriet from her top 3 key takeaways, what does it mean from a reward perspective as well? And finally, you'd want to think about the people. How are we engaging the workplace and workforce into being on board with the skills-based practicalities of this and the everyday management of it? So to bring these 2 pathways together, the targeted path lets you start small, solve specific business problems, create the momentum with evidence. The structural path is how you hard code skills into your business so that you can scale sustainably. And this implementation guide that I've put together for the FSSC will help you choose your entry point. If you're unsure where to begin, pick a targeted use case, run a pilot, and let the results make the case. Either way, the destination will be the same: a skills-based organisation that is more agile, more resilient, and better prepared for what's next in financial services.
Thank you, Serena, and thank you, Harriet, really setting out the big picture, but also the practicalities of how to eat the big pie that is skills-based organisation. And just on your work, Serena, I know you worked really closely with members to build this and to test it and to kick the tires on it to make sure it was relevant. Can you switch between the 2 paths? Is it interchangeable? What did you find?
Yeah, definitely. And it actually leads really nicely into Lauren, who's joined us from Ageas, and we'll talk through this. So, speaking to a lot of our members, the key entry point here was starting small and scaling from there. So they would start with a pilot, they would get the evidence, and then they can take that to leaders and say, look, here's where we can see that skills is really helping us solve our business problems. And this can then help them unlock that investment to move to the structural path, get that investment for the business case, because sometimes it's not always easy to unlock thousands of pounds to invest in a tech platform. So how do you get leaders on board? And typically with our members who may sit in HR or in talent spaces, they're really driving this, and they can then use that evidence to go to leaders and make that shift happen.
No, thanks, Serena. So leads us nicely on to Lauren. Tell us how you approach this at Ageas with your targeted approach.
Yes, happy to. And afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Knolleth. I'm the Skills, Talent and Leadership Development Manager here at Ageas UK. And our journey began probably a couple of years ago now. It's worth me saying up front that Ageas has always had a very development orientated culture, but we were starting to see signs that we maybe needed to shift our approach a little bit and start thinking longer term about skills and really identifying what was going to be important to us in the longer term. So to put some flavour on that, we were experiencing some challenges around recruiting certain roles. So some of the ones you hear quite a lot about: data scientists, pricing analysts in our case. And of course, that not only has an impact on productivity, but often leads to managers then seeking to bridge the gap by bringing temporary resourcing, which is firstly expensive and also kind of counterintuitive when we can see that elsewhere in the organisation, we've got roles that are probably going to reduce in requirement over time due to AI and digital adoption, with huge potential for reskilling. But of course, reskilling initiatives take time to stand up and deliver. So without that forewarning, we were limited as to the extent that we could achieve that. And similarly, we've got a very dedicated and collaborative learning and development function. But the nature of those conversations, we would say, were probably quite operational. And when we looked across the interventions that were being delivered, we weren't convinced that they were the ones that were really going to shift the dial on our organisational capability. So my boss took the decision to introduce the role I'm in now to give our skills-based journey some deliberate focus, because where do you start with this sort of thing? It's a huge topic, isn't it? And there are so many different options. And it really needed someone that could look at it sort of end to end, really, and decide what our strategy needed to look like. So one of the first things we did was approach our executive team with a proposal for some gap analysis workshops for each individual function. And those workshops were intended to give us a view of where is this function today in terms of composition. So what are the roles within this function? What are the core sort of skills that are required by those roles? And then the second stage of the workshop was, okay, what sort of external trends are likely to influence us? So we actually used some of the resources from the Commission, such as the Future Skills Report, to highlight that. It gave us a means of saying, here's what's going on externally. To what extent does that influence us? And also, what about our own internal journey? So Ageas is in the midst of probably the biggest transformation activity that it's ever been through. And we were saying to each function, but the impact of that will vary depending on function. So we're saying, what does this mean to you? And then finally, as we've been through all that, with all of that in mind, what is this function likely to look like in 3 to 5 years' time? So to the best of our knowledge, where will we see more roles? Where will we see less roles? Are there new roles that we're likely to introduce? And how are we going to acquire those? And what are the really priority skills? So where do we really need to be focusing our efforts? And that then gave us a view of, so we could take the outputs for each function and pull them together to say, right, okay, at organisational level, here are the areas we really need to be thinking about. And here's the start of our build, borrow, buy, retain or redeploy plan. And here's where we're going next.
Wow, it sounds like quite a journey. Where do you say you are in your sort of maturity?
It's interesting what Serena was saying there about starting on one pathway and moving to another. So I would say we started in quite a targeted way. We really needed to get executive sponsorship for it and commitment from the senior leaders for the activity itself and to start the journey, because like I say, there's so many different places you could start. And I would say now we're sort of shifting more towards implementation. And there was a bit on your strategic pathway, Serena, about incorporating the outputs within core HR processes. The sort of key deliverables for us this year on our skills-based journey, and we have to take into account where we are with our integration and transformation activity as well to give us a clue on timing. We have got a lot of upskilling and reskilling initiatives that we're looking at, but we're also prioritising our performance management process. So how do we better utilise that process to enable the culture we're seeking to deliver, and our talent and succession planning process linked to that as well. So where we might previously have talked about jobs and planning for jobs, we're now talking about the skills the organisation will need and how we develop those in our high potential employees to make sure we've got those for the future.
Great, thank you. So you've lots done already, proven the approach and now sort of taking it to the next step. Thank you. I think we will come back to you with some questions. But let's hear from Kate at Barclays that you've taken a more structural approach to your skills-based journey. So talk us through what you did and how it's working.
Hello everyone, nice to be here today. And just to introduce Kate Ramsden from Barclays, and I lead the job architecture and skills, which probably wasn't a job a couple of years ago that existed. But our journey, Claire, exactly as you said, and like Serena was saying, and actually dare I say, we started off in the targeted world probably 5 to 6 years to look at what skills certain jobs had, but actually we were doing it in a very piecemeal bottoms up. And actually we had a very unique opportunity, which doesn't come along and I recognise won't be the same necessarily for a lot of firms, but we were actually moving to a new HRIS system. And as a result, that gave us almost our business case to move to the structured pathway. And what we've done is, I'm going to refer to it as building the foundations for us of what we would call our workforce in terms of understanding the jobs and the skills across our workforce. So we implemented our job architecture. And because of our transition to a new HR system, it kind of put us in a unique position to do it. We had to do it at scale, and we had to do it across the whole bank. So we implemented quite a program at speed and at pace to implement that job architecture. What that's meant is we've able to simplify and get a view of our entire workforce. And at the point we were going live on this in sort of July 24, we had around 130,000 colleagues. That's that scale. And we had created a job architecture, and we had essentially created 25 job family groups and defined probably around 600 job profiles, and then mapped every single colleague to those job profiles. So for us, it gave us a unique way of now looking at what are the jobs across our entire workforce, what's the scale of the jobs we have. And also, as we built our job architecture, we identified the skills that those jobs needed. And so what that's enabled us to do now, and I always think there's two sides of the coin when we're looking at skills. The first half now is, what jobs do we have in our workforce, and what skills should we have in those jobs? The question we continue to answer now is, well, what skills have we got in our workforce relative to the jobs that we need? And I think Serena and Harriet, going back to that supply and demand, it's always trying to work out, well, what have I got? What do I need? So essentially what we have enabled now is, over the last 2 years, has built this foundation. And it's now starting us to help understand, well, what can we do now from the development lens? And so we've done a huge amount of work on helping our colleagues understand what skills they should have relative to the jobs that are defined on their job profiles, but also then how do you build those skills? And so we're thinking enterprise-wide development pathways to help upskill colleagues. We are like others, and I think, Harriet, you said it, so it is a journey. We'll hear it, and I get many benefits from the FSSC for the networks and the connections, almost the shared journey, and it's hard work at times, so it's always very welcome to hear other members' sort of feedback on how they're tackling different pieces. But certainly for us now, it's that, how do we get a better view now on the skills of our workforce? How do we also then start to think about that strategic workforce planning? How do we then truly hire for all those skills? Because we have the framework in the sense of what we're working through, but you've got to integrate it carefully into all your different talent processes. So I remain really proud and really pleased what we've built. Job architecture has gone from something of, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense, to it. It's in every component. It's the way we look at our businesses. It's the way we're getting insights. So that alone has been a massive step forward. And certainly from my perspective now, as we go forward, we've got the intel. We need to do more on the skills we actually have in our workforce. So it's one thing to know what's required of the job, but we are working hard, and we'll explore different options on how we can accelerate to sort of get that real time. And Harriet, again, you mentioned it earlier, but how do you get a real time view of the skills I've actually got? And how do we think about not having to be dependent on a colleague on telling us? How can we use the systems to understand what skills colleagues have got? So for us, again, long journey to go, but we definitely see the benefits, and how we're looking and how we run and look at our workforce today at the opportunities. The other piece we've done a lot on is internal mobility. So we do a lot of work in pre-deployment and redeployment, where we can sort of say jobs that are shrinking and opportunities where we're growing, we can, with the infrastructure and the architecture we've got already, do some quick comparisons to say, is there a skills match? Do we think at the highest level there is? And that really, again, helps us chase down conversations to go, what can we do? So again, that's been a definite win that we've seen since we've implemented. So that gives you a bit of the experience. I will say also, we keep flipping from structured to targeted. And I say that in reality. A good example is we have the ability for colleagues to self-assess skills. Now, we know that takes a lot to encourage people to build their trust and confidence to go in. So we're actually doing that targeted routes now of working out, and some teams have blown me away. They've large numbers, thousands of colleagues in teams. They've got 80% of colleagues to self-assess. From that, we've then been able to look at what's the trend and aggregated data to really inform where we invest our development spending to bring those skills up. So again, but that's not in a structured way. We're doing that with targeted, because we're learning what needs to be true for people to be confident to self-assess. So Claire, hopefully that's a few snippets in terms of where we are, what we've focused on, and some of the pathway that we're working through. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And do just to the audience, do put your questions in the Q&A, because we're going to work through some of this with our panel. But I'm going to stick with you, Kate, for the time being. But I will ask Lauren, Harriet, and Serena to come in. But what you've mentioned, internal mobility is something you're seeing as a benefit. You can do more on that now. But what other quick wins and benefits have you got? And how have you evidenced this? This is a lot of work. This is a lot of investment. So how are you evidencing those benefits to the organisation that's allowing this journey to continue?
It's pilots, it's test and learns, it's user stories, and therefore our framework is bank wide. Now it's how do you get the best out of that framework? How do you use that architecture to your benefit? So, and as I say, we have some parts of the bank who are running ahead and really utilising the functionality, testing the functionality, and embracing really targeted development plans. And then for others, we've got ones where we need to work with them to help them consider what's the best opportune way to leverage some of this. And maybe some of the solutions isn't quite right for them. It's not the level of specificity they need. So again, we try and always work with kind of what's the best use cases, and how do we really keep focused on, is it going to drive the outcome that business needs? And if it isn't, what can we learn from that, and what would need to be true for us to enable that in the future?
Thank you. Lauren, Harriet, Serena, do you want to add anything to that about how you're seeing the evidence of the benefits of this approach?
Yeah, I would say for us, the thing we saw immediately was the nature of the conversation changed. So we were starting to have, or rather you could draw a direct link between the conversation we were having about support for particular areas to their strategic priorities. So that was great, because it really positioned the function as the strategic partner that we aspire to be. But we've also, as part of ours, or one of our initiatives, we've implemented a measures dashboard so that we can track the impact of some of our initiatives. And we can see now that our resources are being invested in different skills, basically. So for each of the priority skills we identified, we can see things like the number of learning hours that are being committed to that particular skill over time. And there are skills in there that we weren't even really talking about before. So some of them, data, AI, were already getting quite a lot of airtime, but some of the enabling skills have really been boosted. So it's given us greater confidence that we're supporting in the most impactful way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in some of the pilots last year, we also see where a skills-based approach was taken to transform parts of the workforce, particularly front office. The customer experience was improving, and the customer reach was improving. So it wasn't an efficiency lens, it was very much a productivity lens. And I think, to everything Lauren and Kate have talked to, understanding where your skills are and what you need allows you to have more targeted workforce strategies that drive a bigger return, and those integrated talent strategies. And we know that workers are wanting to be upskilled. They're looking around, knowing their skills are changing. And we know that even from some VAR research, I think it's workers who are being supported to upskill are 73% more motivated, much more loyal to the business, much more likely to stay with you for a longer term career and develop those skills. So huge amounts of benefits in various different ways.
Thanks. And it also, the more you know about the gaps you've got, the more targeted you can be on filling them. So it doesn't have to be about more money on training. It's actually the right training for the right person at the right time. Or you're all nodding, that's good. We've got some questions in. The taxonomy is coming up. Quite a lot of questions. So without a taxonomy, how can you define the skills you need? So, is this possible without some sort of basic taxonomy? And also there's a second question which is related. So the first one was from Claire Gardner, the second one's from Sophie Millington. But, how can you understand the skills people have, do you just look at capability, or is it just the skills? What sort of proficiency are you looking at there? So what do you need to have? You talked about foundations, Kate. What do you need to have that's a must-have for this, and what can you kind of build later?
So how we built it, today we don't have a skills taxonomy per se. We have a skills library. So there's around 300 skills that I know I have around that on all the jobs across our business. So I know that library. But we built those skills through a combination of ways. We worked with a consultancy who helped us almost do a quick search. A lot of the other firms externally, or many of suppliers you can quickly see this. So almost looking at what the top 10 skills. So part of our piece is you can boil the ocean, but let's keep it simple. What can a colleague remember? What's the top 10 skills that a role requires? And actually then help the business to validate they're the correct skills. So that's how we built our skills to our job profiles, Claire, in the sense of we wanted to do a combination. And the reason we did it that way is we were leaving our options open to which skills taxonomy should we align to, which I think is still the $64 million question sometimes, because there's many and there's pros and cons. Our HRI system is our source of skills, and we've been very much, as part of our design principles, trying not to bespoke to Barclays too much, because we don't want to have to constantly manage and maintain offline libraries or offline details. So whilst I know I've got a skills library, I know the skills I need across the organisation, I'm also using real-time data from our HRI system of actually when we're coming to hire, what skills are we adding? But also from my perspective, just like I'm sure many of you use different firms to get skill insights on, we are constantly looking by job family now, do we need to refresh it? So for me at the moment, the limitation of not having a taxonomy or not aligning to a taxonomy is your really nice, neat reporting and your ability to look at adjacencies. Now, a lot of the HR systems, the ones that we work on today, have that adjacency, but it's hidden behind the scenes, so I can't see it. And again, at the moment, it's frustrating, but I can't sweat the small stuff is probably the nicest thing. I have to look at, can it give me enough data to understand where are the big gaps? And then for myself, it's giving us options now to go, actually, which taxonomy should we align to? Because I'm sure they're not, they're still coming on that side of that decision of what to align to. So still some big decisions, but it's one of those things, it hasn't stopped us doing what we're doing. Yeah. And that's probably would be my source. And I think the other difference, Claire, we started this sort of 2-3 years ago. Oh my goodness, if we'd had like some of the AI functionality that we have now, how quick we could have done our analysis. So I see that with my team in the sense of actually our speed to have been able to give them that insight. So anybody starting now from my side, I think you're it's a really good position. My last thing I would add on this one is just have clear design principles from the outset, because otherwise you could have, and this was the face one, when you start bottoms up, you then find out you've got 15, 20, 30, 40 different design principles across masses of teams. So if you are doing a targeted, just start and get a few of those principles designed from the outset to set you off in good stand. So Claire, hopefully that covers a number of things, but we don't have a taxonomy, we align. It's challenging on reporting. It works for some of the matching that happens in the system. It's just sometimes frustrating. I don't get the visibility and the transparency to that taxonomy. So definitely pros and cons.
Helpful. Thank you, Kate. And Lauren.
Yes, so we have a taxonomy, but that wasn't being particularly well utilised at the point we started. Now, we could have gone very targeted and gone there and got very specific insight on different skills, but we decided we needed to start broad and see what's the bigger picture here, and then we'll come back. That requires a lot of investment for all the reasons Kate's just mentioned, and we weren't really sure that was going to give us the biggest impact. So we decided to go broad first of all and talk about skills at a higher level, because that would better enable us to point to themes, cross-functional themes. What I would say, so someone asked the question whether it's possible to do it without a taxonomy. I think it's possible to do it without a taxonomy, but I do think we benefited from having a common language throughout each of the conversations we had, because you can talk to one function about data and they mean something completely different to another function, but they're just using the same word, and we needed to be able to really drill down into what it was they meant. So to help us with that, we actually used the Commission's gap analysis framework and key skills dictionary, and we had to bespoke the framework to make it sort of fit for what we were trying to achieve. But the dictionary in particular gave us that common language that we could use in each of the discussions we were having, so we could be much more specific about where we had synergies across different functions. So to take it to our next level, at some point we will also want to explore the taxonomy again. Kate talked a lot about job architecture linked to the introduction of a new HRIS. We're actually on that journey as well. So part of why we haven't done that yet is because we know that activity is coming down the track. So we'll, in the interest of efficiency, we'll join those two up later. But yes.
Thank you. And are you also, to answer Sophie's question, are you also looking at skill levels, or just has someone got good relationship management skills, or the level?
We talked about proficiencies within that. So we again talked in terms of top 10 skills for each function, because we wanted to be able to get our arms around it. But we talked about levels of proficiency within that. So we could see roughly, and that's not an exact science when you're talking to different groups of leaders, but it at least gave you a feel for where you had common levels, if you like, across the organisation. Thanks.
Harriet, you want to add anything?
I think it's brilliant just to hear the conversation, because you can see the slightly different approaches, because everyone's journey is unique. And right now I'm working with an organisation who's got 40 different skills taxonomies across their organisation to try and combine that into what Lauren said, one common language. Equally, working with another insurance organisation who's really looking at what are the kind of 8 or 6 nexus skills, what are the critical skills that they want to focus their initiatives around, which played to what Kate said as well, and Lauren on your kind of top 10, and therefore where do you target around your talent initiatives around the most important skills that are going to make a difference for you. I think I don't know any organisation who started with a skills taxonomy which hasn't evolved that, so it will grow and you will shift it, but use a framework to start. And then proficiency is a hugely hot topic. Again, it starts to bring in different depths of experience to skills when you look at proficiencies. And the question I always ask organisations is, why do you want to do proficiencies? What value will it give? And it's very useful in areas of big disruption. It's very useful when you're trying to look at different levels of skills and where do you want to apply different training or upskilling. And of course, there's different ways you can do proficiency now in terms of self-assessment, management assessments, or you can infer through the technologies, looking at different data points, levels of proficiency to give you broad workforce insights. So lots of different ways to go about it. The main thing is to make progress and set your design principles, like Kate said.
No, absolutely. I think there's loads of tools out there, and I'll name a couple. So we have a future skills framework that we created at the Commission that's got 13 the highest priority skills that members have told us they have proficiency levels. So some firms can just use that. That's on our website. It's available to everybody. Lauren, you've mentioned the skills gap analysis toolkit. Again, that was something that we got from members, good practice around that forecasting analysis piece. Again, that's available on our website. People want to download that. And also the UK government has just created a standard skills classification that's in beta at the moment, but there is a link. I'm asking the team to put these all into the chat, so hopefully that'll come shortly. But there is a link. There's a government's classification now that's got skills, tasks, links to jobs and qualifications as well, which, like I say, it's in beta testing. If you log in and create an account, you can actually provide feedback to them, because they do want feedback to make this very user-friendly. You can download elements as well. So that kind of alignment and constant evolution of a taxonomy framework is really important. We're getting lots of questions coming in. Kate, one is for you on self-assessment. If colleagues are self-assessing, how have you managed to get that high level? I think you said 80% of colleagues self-assessing. How have you done that?
Yeah, so that's with one particular team. So it's not on the structured, it's on the targeted, with a particular team who, if I'm honest, it's leadership, it's engagement, it's trust. And it's also about it's the rationale for what's it being used for. And actually it's being used for to really inform where do they need to invest in their budget in terms of where they're going to spend to bridge the biggest gaps they've got. So for example, it's trying to do, and it's like the team's around 4,000, so it's a sizable number. So if you can go through and get a campaign and the narrative's clear, the trust is clear, and actually this is about development, that's how we've been able to drive and get the successes on that side. There is, and I think Lauren, you might mention it, but it's the pitfalls or the self-assessment, it's the confidence to my challenge is probably what are we using it for and what's it going to tell us? Because there's a lot of debate around actually, can I self-assess? How am I able to self-assess effectively? Is my leader being able to self-assess? So we have lots of debates again about the accuracy of it. But when you're getting to, I guess, a insight on spend, this is an aggregate investment, so for me it's trend data, and that's where it's really powerful. But there will be some teams who, quite frankly, from an organizational change, won't want to go into that because it's the wrong time, wrong so it has to be right for that team. And for me it's the leader led and the support all the way through to the benefits, and the people leader then actually discussing that on that framework. So I think that's the most important piece of the trust on why I would self-assess.
Yeah, and I suppose it comes to another question about bringing everyone with you as well on this journey. Don't know if Lauren, would you want to add anything?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the best decisions we made along the way was to get that executive sponsorship at the outset. So because we were in the midst of transformation activity, there was a real risk that it wouldn't have been prioritised because people were so busy with everything else. And it took for us to make that proposal to them to say, you really can't afford not to do this. It's as much of it, first of all, it's going to enable your business transformation. But also, if we don't do this now, we're just getting further behind because the world is moving so quickly. So yeah, taking people on the journey, I would say that was, really important for us.
And a similar question to that, and we're getting lots of questions in now, so I'm going to try and push us through them. There's a question about government support for more on this. So, for example, women pivoting to digital roles, etc., and getting talent in, a more diversity of talent. And it's not necessarily just a question for government, I guess, but can you see benefits from this approach in thinking differently about talent coming in and different opportunities? Is that something you're seeing, Harriet? Do you see that?
Yeah, we've actually been working with local councils and educational institutions and different governments across Europe actually to really think about what is the skills of the future and fundamentally how does this boost GDP and quality of life. So this absolutely works on a macro level much bigger. I think, Claire, to your point, the government in the UK has launched the UKRI Skills Hub, so lots of useful resources there, and we were involved with them doing that. But really understanding, particularly on STEM jobs, etc., how you're getting people to access the workforce, access education, breaking down formal jobs and qualifications to provide more entry points. This is a brilliant approach. I think the government is working on it, but they are expecting us as organisations to really fill in some of those gaps and partner with them to advance it faster.
Great. No, thank you. Another question from Xiao. How much of this is business led and how much is HR led? How, is it been a better bottom up, top down? Where have you had your kind of battles and allies? If you like, people to convince, battles is the wrong word, but people to convince and people where they're already on board.
I'm happy to take that. I think from my perspective, I was quite lucky in that we immediately got support for the proposal in itself. So we were able to convince people of its value straight away. The challenge for us was over timing, because what we didn't want, because of all the transformation activity that was ongoing, we didn't want to start the activity and then realise we needed to rework it straight away. So we had to be quite tactical about how we did that. And then once the workshops got underway and the conversation started, I would say the balance has shifted a little bit. So it was initially led out by HR, us sort of positioning it with the business. But now we've got functional plans in place that involve that function, or the function themselves tend to steer a bit more than we do. So we make sure they're on track, but they're as invested in the actual initiatives as we are.
No, thank you. Anything you want to add, Kate?
Yeah, so look, there's something about go where the demand is for me, because yes, when you're doing a big structured deployment, you have to get everything lined up top to bottom, you have to pilot, you have to test, and you have to scale. But now we've got the framework stuff. I'm going and I'm being drawn to where are some of leaders more active in this space. And actually, there's some parts of our firm that are ahead of us on that side. And that's the bit where you just have to kind of work out where's the right space to play for that particular business in that particular time with that leadership engaged. And sometimes it is that combination of timing, leadership, sponsorship, and then the framework that all comes together. And I think it's a learn for me that actually doing this at scale, you'll only get so far. You really do have to go where the demand is or go where the need is. And that's taken me probably a bit of a time to kind of adjust, but it shifts me now to how I work with the HR talent partners, or for example, how they actually then socialize what's coming up on the agenda, and that's how we're aligning to make sure we're supporting them. So that's probably my steer on that piece, because it's hard work. You can't do it everywhere at the same time, and it's choosing which area to go into first.
Yeah, I think Lauren, you and I have spoken about that previously, that there might be some areas that are having particular change that it's just not the right moment.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. So, for example, we saw that we anticipated that the integration activity would have a really significant impact on our IT function because of the nature of the tech stack changing and all of that sort of thing. So we thought, well, the timing just isn't right to go to them straight away. Let's create some momentum with some of the other areas, and we'll come to them a little bit later. So yes, that was something that we were cognizant of as well.
Thank you. More questions on taxonomy. So the links I mentioned, I think, have been put in the chat. So if you want to click in the chat, you can see the links to the tools that I mentioned, the Commission tools, but also the government skills classification. Claire's asked again if we can suggest any publicly available common language of skills. The government's one is one of them. But also, how often do you think you need to review this? This is a question from Nithya. How often do you think you need to update this governance around your list of skills or your library, etc.? Kate?
Yeah, so we do what we call an annual attestation. So we work with each of our job family groups, and through a period of time of the year, we look at job architecture and the skills. And then we do a bit of a test to kind of we offer an always on service, because you can't also just restrict it to once and done. But what we do want to do is just go back to each of our job family groups and go, is this still fit for purpose? What insight can we give? And that's TA insight. It's reward insight. It's trying to bring a collective view. And sometimes it's prodding to kind of go, has anything changed? So that's what we do annually on that side. But I always describe our job, we call it a job catalogue to our colleagues, but we always have an always on service, because there are certain jobs that actually the business are now coming to a certain point that they need to react or need to accommodate for. And again, it's not every individual job. These are jobs at scale where we see, a need for them from a profile perspective to go into the catalogue longer term. So Claire, it's absolutely every year we do a point in time review, but we offer an always on service, and that's something we'll continue to iterate. We've also got to think about, there might be new skills adding, but which ones are coming off, but they might not have come off. And we have a library, and we call it a library on that side, because that skill might still be utilised by others in that firm. We know which one is new and which one's being replaced, but it's at what point of the scale. And that's the piece where you just have to, again, look back at and kind of go, what trends are happening or what's changing differently.
Thank you. There's someone's put in the comments that you're linked to the Sphere framework, which is again a taxonomy that people use. Skills Builder is another one. The ONET is, there's lots out there, which is very interesting, definitely. Lauren, there's a question about filling skills gaps by retired candidates who bring specialist subject matter expertise.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. So I am. So it's not something we've got specific experience of. We haven't got a particular initiative in that space, but generally speaking, what this activity has enabled us to do is obviously create pool or identify the pools where we want to be able to invest for the future. And one of our opportunities there is now to diversify the pipeline. So I mentioned at the start, this was partly driven by the need to, or some challenges in the recruitment space. We don't want to be dependent on the external market. We want to find ways to do that differently. So that sort of initiative or that sort of example would all form part of our thinking alongside how can we better optimise things like the apprenticeship levy, potentially exploring things like T levels, that sort of thing as well. So yes, not something we have specific experience of, but would sit in that sort of bracket for us.
Thank you. We're hurtling towards our hard deadline of 1 o'clock. So I'm going to ask all of you quickly to tell me, what are your 2 or 3 top tips that you would share from your experience having done this? Things you shouldn't do, should do more of, you wish you'd done differently. So quick fire, Harriet, I'm going to start with you.
Be targeted. So start small, experiment, learn, join a network, join the FSSE, absolutely, because go along the journey, because you need friends in this and everyone's, navigating this together.
Thank you. Kate.
Design principles. If you are designing, I would go for that. And then something we probably didn't touch on much today but reporting. So whatever you're putting in and where you've got to kind of map your data strategy or kind of work out where your data is going to show up and how are you going to report on it, because that piece is really important when colleagues start to add skills as well. So yeah, data.
Thank you. Lauren.
Yeah, I would probably build on Harriet's point and say, don't try and eat the elephant whole. You start somewhere, but be considered in where you start. The journey will become clear once you've got started. And yeah, just leave yourself space to flex and adapt your approach along the way.
Thank you. And Serena, anything that from building this framework, talking to lots of firms about how they approach this, what would your takeaways be?
Data will really give you that evidence on where to go next. So similar to what's already been said.
Great, thank you. So just finally, I've had a question in the chat. Is the session being recorded? Yes, it is. So we will just clean up the edit and put it on YouTube. So we will send that link out in the next few days, so you can pass it on to colleagues. Rewatch it at your leisure if you want to, and take all the learnings. Serena, quickly, what's next?
So really excited to obviously have launched the implementation guide, which was shared at the start of the call. But what's next for us is the FSSE is thinking about how do we make this business case for skills that, HR professionals, like many of us on this call, maybe, how do we take that to leadership to unlock that level of investment? Having a clear evidence-based rationale for investment will really help you make skills a strategic lever going forward.
Thank you. And something to watch out for as well is our annual skills report, which is due out at the end of March, which is our data from members about saying where the demand for skills is changing and how firms are approaching this. So that's an annual piece. So look out for that. But at the end, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our participants, Kate and Lauren, but also Harry and the partnership with PwC on this piece has been incredibly valuable, and being able to work with Serena has been fantastic. So huge thank you to everyone for joining and to the panelists, and I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.